Putin is out in the cold. Putin is a pariah. Putin is an indicted war criminal. And Trump can bring him in, has already begun to talk to him. Trump can cut that off. Yes, I think it's possible for Trump to exert that leverage.
I mean, the news overnight that we'll be reporting this morning is that Rubio and Witoff won't be at this summit meeting today. People read various things into that. How much should we read into their non-attendance, do you think?
So I think not too much. The schedules certainly for Secretary Rubio are made out days, weeks sometimes in advance. He's got to be places that are expecting him to be there on time. I don't make very much of the fact that he won't be there. And Witkoff has not met with Ukrainians, so I think that's actually a missed opportunity. He should talk to the Ukrainians, hear their side of this whole story, but I wouldn't read too much into that early departure.
But I guess the point, it feeds into a narrative, certainly over here, William, that America is getting close to washing its hands of Ukraine. Trump said it might take a pass if a deal isn't done. This notion that this is not as important to America as it is to the Europeans for obvious geographical reasons. And this is just another tiny point in the general direction of travel, which is from the Trump administration away from peace in Ukraine.
Actually, I think they're still focused on it. As you've reported, President Trump, candidate Trump, made this top priority in the campaign, said 24 hours. Of course, it wasn't going to be done in 24 hours. But since he's been in office, he has spent, and his people have spent, a whole lot of time on this. This business about possibly moving on, I think that's a pressure tactic, negotiating tactic. I'm sure it reflects some frustration that things aren't moving, and it seems to have had an effect. It seems to have had an effect on Putin. Putin, when he heard this, offered a 30-hour ceasefire. Putin doesn't want him to walk away. Putin is wanting to string Trump along. So I think from both sides, it has had an effect of putting some pressure on Putin to come to the table. That's what's necessary.
But isn't the danger that Putin, exactly your point, that it's not real pressure because Putin's not really responding? He mentioned a 30-hour ceasefire, which he then didn't abide by. And the danger, I suppose, is that, as you say, Putin is playing Trump a little bit.
That's the danger. That's the danger. And so what Trump needs to do is use the leverage that he's got. Trump needs to indicate to Putin that there are costs to dragging this out. The costs could be, which Trump has said before, that is additional economic sanctions. Trump has talked about if Putin doesn't come to the table, Trump has said he'll put sanctions on India and China for buying Russian oil. Or Trump has said that if Putin doesn't come to the table, he will provide weapons to the Ukrainians like they haven't seen before. All to say that there are leverages, there are ways to put pressure on Putin to get him to come to the table seriously. The Ukrainians have been there. The Ukrainians have agreed on a 30-day ceasefire, air, land, and sea. When Zelensky and Trump agreed with that, and Trump took it to Putin, and Putin said no. So Putin is clearly the problem, and so this could be a pressure point on Putin.
And honestly, William, hand on your heart, do you believe? Because this is the billion-dollar question. Do you believe Trump is willing and able to take Putin on in this way? Because the fear expressed by many people closely observing to this is that Trump actually, he has a relationship with Putin. He doesn't really, he might even have some sort of coercion from Putin. He's not really willing, when it comes right down to it, to take Putin on. Do you think he is?
I think we will see, Stig. I think we will see. If Putin continues to stall, and if Trump does want to have this success, if Trump wants to be a winner, if he doesn't want to be outplayed, outnegotiated by Putin, then he will put the pressure on. Yes, he does want, he's indicated before that he wants to have this relationship, but that's a source of leverage as well. Putin needs that more. I think Putin needs that kind of recognition and relationship with Trump more than Trump needs Putin. Putin is out in the cold. Putin is a pariah. Putin is an indicted war criminal. And Trump can bring him in, has already begun to talk to him. Trump can cut that off. Yes, I think it's possible for Trump to exert that leverage.
There's a plan doing the rounds that's been reported in this country, which I think comes from the US, which is effectively more or less a freezing of the battlefield position. The Ukrainians would have to concede almost all the land taken by Russia in the last couple of years. They'd have to concede concede Crimea. And then there's this question of probably no formal US security. So that's a very settlement tilted in favor of Russia. Is that the sort of deal you think that is going to end up being on the table that America's willing to live with, which is almost you stay where you are, you actually get rewarded for your invasion to a certain extent, Russia, and we try and freeze things? That's the almost best case scenario on the table for Ukraine.
No, I don't think so. I think, first of all, I think Ukraine will not accept that. They've been able to say no. They've said no to the minerals deal, and they renegotiated. And number two, President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people are one on this. They will never recognize Russian claim to Crimea. They will not recognize it. It may be that the United States will recognize it. I hope they don't. I hope we don't. I think that would be a mistake. But nonetheless, that has been reported as a possibility that the Americans would recognize it. My bet is the Europeans would not recognize Russia's claim to Crimea. And you talk about security guarantee. There is impressive discussion, plans, even actions being taken by the Brits and by the French and others to come up with a security guarantee with a force, a reassurance force that would deploy into Ukraine.
But William, Starmer, our prime minister, says that still needs a US backstop, which doesn't seem to be forthcoming. Putin says he wouldn't accept that in any condition. Are we not always come back to the same point that all of these things, the idea of recognizing Crimea or not recognizing Crimea, no one is ever going to agree on all of these things? So the big danger here is that the positions of the US, Russia, Ukraine, and Europe are just completely atomized. They're never going to come close together.
Well, I don't think we can say that yet, Stig. I don't think we can say that yet. Yeah, there are problems, but there are also problems that don't have to be solved. That is, we don't care if the Russians don't like this reassurance force. They don't get a say in this reassurance force. When the Brits and the French and others are talking about reassurance, they're not talking to the Russians. They're talking to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians get the decision to invite another country or group of countries, because coalition, to come into their country. So the Russians don't get a say on that. Yeah, they may not agree to the overall ceasefire, but they don't get a say as to whether or not the Europeans come in to support the Russians. And it's not incompatible for the Ukrainians not to legally recognize the Russian claim in Crimea, and the Americans to recognize it. That's that people can live with that. That's not necessarily a deal breaker.
It's interesting. You're a wise man to talk us through all of this, William. We do appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stig.